Welcome to the Daily Agenda. An interesting day for Lucy Connolly, I would say, as I know exactly what it feels like to be released from prison that very first day, and the extent to which it can make your head spin. Suddenly there's all that illusion of freedom, whatever freedom actually means. Well, there is no real freedom whilst you're still on probation, I can guarantee you that for a fact. Anyone who's been on probation will understand that, particularly when they've been on probation for thought crimes and hurty words, so-called, in a regime utterly obsessed with inflicting instruments of tyranny on right-wing people in particular. And so that's the problem with Lucy Connolly, is that she's perceived to be right-wing, centre-right, admittedly, Tory, but, you know, slightly to the right of the current Tory party. A little bit more right-wing than Kemi Badenoch, one might argue. But the tweet she put out, obviously, which led to her imprisonment, was most unwise, very foolish, and I'm sure she did genuinely regret it. You know, it was a moment of angst and grief and anxiety and anger. And really, it should have been disposed of with a caution, quite frankly, because it wasn't, and it went to court and she pleaded guilty. Really, she should have just been given an absolute discharge. But the judge couldn't do that, you see, because there's no such thing as an independent judiciary. That is absolute nonsense, and when Keir Starmer says we have an independent judiciary, you can just ignore that like everything else the incurable liar has to say, because he's a lawyer and they're all incurable liars. And as I said before, no lawyer will ever go to heaven while there's room for one more in hell, and there's plenty more room in hell for lawyers, being no doubt about it. Hopefully they'll discover that when the time comes. But that said, one must not think that there's suddenly going to be an outpouring, a litany of truth-telling from Lucy Connolly. And if there is, then it means that there's something seriously wrong with the probation system. Now, we know little Tommy Robinson never has to put up with these restrictions. I wonder why that is. He gets released from prison and just does whatever he wants. In fact, he's been involved in serious assault and a whole raft of things, and still not been returned to prison. No recall. Absolutely. Very interesting. Perhaps Tommy could explain that one when he's not in a coke rage, that is, or pissed, which is his usual frame of mind most of the time. But with Lucy Connolly, we'd have to hope that she's not going to resort to such drastic measures and physical abuse and also abuse online, because it's not going to do her any good, is it? And by rights, she'll be under restrictions. I don't know exactly what her probation restrictions are, but having been on probation for something far less serious, although I got much longer in prison, you know, Lucy Connolly is not an exceptional case at all. Not exceptional, although the centre-right seem to believe that they do have this exceptionalism. It exists only in their own mindset. So, yes, usually probation will try and run the show, take over, and they will try and dictate to you along the lines of, well, if you write this, or if you write that, or if you publish this, or publish the other, we'll have to investigate it with a view to recalling you to prison. And if you don't do this, and you don't do that, and you don't do the other, in other words, if you're not a good little boy, then we'll have to send you back to prison. Well, my own experience of dealing with probation is cooperative non-cooperation. I covered it in my book, Offended. And if you've not bought a copy, I would urge you to do so, because it's better legal advice than any bent lawyer in this country is ever going to give you, because they've all got an axe to grind against the right wing. They're nearly all lefties and liberal degenerates. Okay? Speaking of which, it's no surprise that Anna Soubry, the Romaniac, had to chip in on the Lucy Connolly case, obviously, because it, in her opinion, it fulfills a constant need to virtue signal. All these virtue signalling lefties. You might say, she's a lefty, she was in the Tory party. That's exactly the point I'm making. She's a lefty, she was in the Tory party, she was closely allied to many lefties, because in truth, ideologically, that's what Anna Soubry is, a lefty. Okay? I sincerely hope we've not caused a fear and alarm and distress. I might, if I have, I probably smell another criminal behaviour order coming on. They're absolutely notorious for it in Nottingham, where Subury prowls the courtrooms, spouting a litany of, well, material that conforms to what I said earlier about lawyers and heaven and hell. But there you go. So Lucy Connolly, yes, by rights she shouldn't be all over social media giving interviews here and interviews there, left, right and centre, because that would mean quite simply that the probation system isn't working properly, or that she's not actually been subjected to severe restrictions, which is what nearly everyone gets in this context, particularly when they're nationalists. And apart from Tommy, of course, because Tommy's not a nationalist, he's actually a centre-left flag group merchant working for Israel. So now we've cleared that matter up again. I thought we'd already cleared it up, but you know, it's difficult for some people. It just doesn't seem to sink in, does it? So you have to keep reiterating these points to ensure that it does sink in, and also just to trigger them, which is what I'm here to do. I'm here to trigger the so-called centre right. And speaking of the centre right, well, you know, this is the thing, is that what Lucy Connolly actually published is far worse than that anything I read in the British National Party from BNP activists. Now, you can be absolutely certain if a BNP activist had been released from prison today, having tweeted anything of the sort, highly unlikely they would be. They'd probably been killed in prison with the full tacit complicity of the evil, corrupt prison service, because that's how they operate. As I explained in previous videos, how they went name dropping around HMP Ramby when I was there, telling people that he used to be in the BNP, because they want to incite other prisoners to seriously injure you or kill you, because they're mostly criminals, these people, and probation are a complete bunch of bastards, quite frankly. They really are power tripping non-entities. And I understand entirely what Lucy will be up against, and everyone else in the hurty words tyranny, particularly when they're right-wing, and if they're particularly right-wing, in other words nationalists, the only people on the right, truly, to be honest with you, then I understand even more so. And so we shouldn't expect really until a licence period has elapsed to see Lucy on television programmes or on a litany of podcasts explaining what she went through in prison. She might well do that, and they may well take a view that, you know, that it's poor behaviour. They can recall you to prison just on suspicion of anything. I'm surprised they never recalled me to prison, because at the end of the day they were hell-bent on it. They absolutely hated me, particularly in Sussex. Dave Aaron in York, who in actual fact was a very nice person, I thought, he was the exception that proved the rule, really, and that's why I've named him. I hope he doesn't get a bad rash of fear, alarm and distress, because I'm actually saying something positive about him and the Probation Service for once, which is unusual, but I speak as I find. And I believe he was a very decent person, in truth. And when I first met him, he said, I read a number of things. I actually met him outside the Jorvik Viking Centre during the lockdown. It's quite amusing, actually, and I struck the immediate opinion that he was a decent chap. And he said, look, I've read a number of things about you on the internet, Simon, and also in your police records, and I'm going to ignore all of that. He said, I'm not going to swallow any of it as being true. He said, I'm just going to treat you in the same way as I would anyone else, you know. And I thought, well, fair play to you, you know. You're not just going to sit there and swallow all the garbage they've concocted about me. You're actually going to treat me decently. And of course, I treated him decently in return. And so really, Dave Aaron in York was by far and away the best person I ever met in the Probation Service. And I feel that he actually went to some lengths to protect me to the best that he could. And he wasn't heavy-handed, and he wasn't malicious about it. And he was pretty honest, I would say, most of the time. Obviously, there are certain things he can't say because of his job and the strictures of working for such an organisation. But, you know, meeting people like Dave Herron is not the norm, I absolutely assure you. I mean, I had a probation officer when I first came out from Nottingham, who was a really nice woman, and she treated me fairly decently. The probation officer I had in Peterborough was a decent chap, and he also treated me very decently. But look, that was it. We're talking about 3 examples out of dozens. 3 examples out of dozens, and Dave Erin was the best of the 3. And there's just a litany of horrible people that work for the Probation Service with a completely cavalier attitude towards truth. They've got no interest in freedom of speech. And one of them I met at St Leonard's said that it was forever bloating about, gloating was it, or bloating, or bloating and gloating. Is there a difference? Yes, he was bloated with his own significance about how the regime would crush any form of rebellion. I didn't see the regime crushing the flag rebellion, which is raging all over the country. And as I explained last night, the reason for it and the fact that it's not going to be crushed and it is going to escalate into something completely different than what it is now. But don't expect Lucy Connolly to be out and about unless she's been given totally different conditions than everyone else I've known in their situation to be speaking about all of these matters, because they'll be on her case quick sharp to recall her to prison, because that's what they want to do. They completely abuse their own authority, in truth. I mean, even Dave Erin, as decent a chap he was with me in interactions, and you know, he was very relaxed about a great many things. He even said to me once that, you know, that if I did publish anything, that he would have to investigate it with a view to recalling me to prison, but recall to prison would always be the very last resort in his case. So, I mean, the way I dealt with Dave Erin and everyone else in the Probation Service is that I gave off the transparent veneer of compliance whilst actually doing nothing of the sort, and they can't prove a damn thing to this day. Did I comply? No, I definitely did not comply. I absolutely guarantee you. I had no intention of complying, and I didn't comply when I was in prison either. I just played exactly the same game. Cooperative non-cooperation. I actively subverted everything they wanted to do, secretly, covertly, and they never once caught me doing it. And that was the lesson I learned some years ago, basically, is not to be quite so blatant and overt about matters unless that had to be done. And I had some very frank conversations with Dave Erin, and I hope Lucy Connolly gets someone very similar to him. Highly unlikely she will. The odds are 99 to 1 you'll get some absolute Marxist piece of shit, quite frankly, on a massive power trip. The one I had in Eastbourne was tipping off a criminal who they planted in the same hotel that I was living in. It used to be a hotel, but it's converted into an HMO. And this is where they insisted I live. And that's another abuse of their authority. And they also insisted that I did certain types of jobs which I refused to do. And they wouldn't let me do the jobs I wanted to do, so I just did them anyway, secretly. Nothing they can do about it. They can't prove a single thing. I'm openly admitting it right now. Not a thing they can do about it. Not one thing. I won. I beat them. Okay? And I know they'll be fuming about it, and that's what I want them to be. I want them to fume about it. That's why I'm taunting them. That's why I'm rubbing it in. Spit and polish. Okay? And Lucy Connolly might not have the opportunity to do this, obviously, because she has a 12-year-old daughter and a husband. But I'm perfectly sure that deep inside she'll feel exactly the same way that I did. And rightly so. Rightly so. Because in truth, as I said, you know, she should have been, her case should have been disposed of with a caution at the police station. And the fact that it didn't and went to court on a guilty plea, really, you know, that should have been an absolute discharge. But obviously they needed to make an example, needed to make a political statement, did they not? And that's what happened to me in Eastbourne, you know, forever making political statements. The bent probation officer there tipping off a criminal that they planted in the same HMO I was living at, a former hotel. And Of course, he did nothing from the absolute outset than cause trouble, provoking trouble, talking about stabbing people, particularly in my presence. And I knew then that I was going to have to get very heavy with him. And it was a very delicate game because I understood what their objective was. It was to recall me to prison on another charge, because these people are downright fucking evil. Okay? Downright fucking evil and twisted. Okay? It takes a special kind of twisted to do what they did. But they failed, because I beat all of them. And the two morons, for want of better description, one of them a fat, huge, fat, disgusting Portuguese immigrant, forever ranting about how much he loved the EU and hated Russia and pro-immigration. Yeah, typical lefty, with his little scumbag, Philip Hall, a well-known local criminal and police informant, because he once told me he was too clever to get sent to prison. And I said to him, well, I think in truth, if you said that to people who'd been in prison, they'd take the view that you were actually a police informant, given the fact that you admitted you used to be the biggest cocaine dealer in this town. Yes, the green grass. They always give themselves away. And it's usually their arrogance. And so, yeah, it came to the crunch. It kicked off, didn't it? Just exactly as she engineered it. And just 3 days before that, she tipped him off, actually giving him restricted information from text messages that I'd sent her about him and his criminal antics in the house and the provocation and his threats to stab people. And, she tipped him off about all of it. You see? All of it. That's how crooked they are. Whether he was actually supplying her with cocaine or not, I probably doubt it, considering the fact that she was so fat. So, cocaine does tend to, and amphetamine does tend to encourage users to lose an awful lot of weight. So I would say he probably wasn't supplying her with cocaine, but they did have a very unhealthy, unnatural relationship. And this is something you will encounter in the probation trap. Because in many ways it's actually worse than prison. The custody phase is actually easy, to tell you the truth, because you know exactly where you stand with the bastards. In probation, it's the illusion of freedom, whilst they're setting one trap after the other for you. And that trap, as it transpired, erupted one night, and obviously I had to introduce the Portuguese fat boy, who was forever bragging about what, and he was well over 20 stone. He was about 25 stone. Enormous, obese man, bragging about what a brilliant judo champion he was. And Dumb Phil was also bragging about how dangerous he was, this judo champion. And I just thought to myself, well, I'm going to have to play this one very carefully, aren't I, and put them both out of action very quickly, whilst using reasonable force. And that's exactly what happened. And the fat man, I introduced his head to the kitchen door, glass door. In fact, if I'd have done it with 1 pound more weight and 1 second faster, his head would have gone straight through the glass window. But obviously I was mindful of the fact to use reasonable force. Unfortunately, I had to do that. Had I not been in that situation, on probation that is, I wouldn't have bothered with any reasonable force. I'd have just knocked them all over the place, bashed them up good and proper. And so, yeah, absolutely. Then obviously little Phil tried to kick off, innit, Governor, with his fake South London accent. You see, it's the problem with most of these people down on the south coast, is that they all think they're chippy little cockneys, innit, bruv? And they think that this accent makes them fucking odd, innit, Governor? You know what I mean? That's why so many of them got this fake London accent. I mean, this particular clown grew up at Lewis on a farm. Some 60 odd miles from South London, but walked around talking like he was a fucking gangster, innit, brother? You know what I mean? I'm connected to all the fucking diamond thieves, innit, in London. You know what I mean, Governor? Oh, please, how tiresome. Boring, really boring. Another clown who's been watching too many Essex Boys films and redneck hooligans and Rise of the Fuckwit, or Rise of the Foot Rot. But yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm on fire tonight, aren't I? Absolutely. And I should be as well, because in truth, you know, it's a very fiery situation, this probation trap. And it worked out, and she was disciplined, that's all, disciplined, given a verbal warning and sent on a training course by a crooked supervisor. And now a crooked supervisor, this is what I'm actually warning people about. This video is not just about Lucy Connolly and the problems that she's got and is going to have with probation. It's about probation full stop and the difficulties that they deliberately engineer. Not all of them, as I said, not all of them, but the vast majority of them will do this. They will resort to any dirty, filthy, underhanded method they can. So when talking to the fat crooks, when I say the fat crook, I mean the probation officer. I'm not talking about the fat Portuguese judo boy, plastic judo boy, after I'd finished with him. Anyway, and yes, boss, she wasn't available to see me at one appointment at Eastbourne, and excuse me, so I had to see her supervisor, who had ice cold blue eyes, a veneer dripping with fake sincerity. I can see through anyone. Don't pull these bullshit antics with me, okay? I can cut through anyone's bullshit, anyone's act. And she sat there talking away, and I sat there pretending to humour her, you know, and I thought, oh, goodness, how tiresome, yet again. When will this meeting be over? And then she closed it by saying, do you know anything about corruption in Sussex Police? Have you ever had anything to do with Sussex Police corruption? And I said to her that I had absolutely no knowledge of any corruption in Sussex Police, and that I had never had any interaction with Sussex Police other than running rings around them when I was in the underground, obviously, but that's not just Sussex Police, that was everywhere else in the country, because they're all a joke, they're amateurs, quite frankly. And I didn't want anything to do with them either. And she sat back and smiled. You see, it was a trap. She was baiting the line to see if I'd take it. You know, and this is what they do. They're horrible fuckers, quite frankly. Really horrible fuckers. And the more left-wing they are, and at that office in Eastbourne, I can absolutely guarantee you, I think probably with the exception of one chap who actually used to work at HMP Lewis himself, who was a prison officer there, and then obviously became a probation officer. They're all lefties, absolutely rabid lefties and liberals, absolutely. And when they're rabid lefties and liberals, it means they're nasty, horrible, corrupt, completely dishonest. And whenever you catch them in the act, they will pretend to be victims. Why is he doing this? Why is he doing this? Said the fat probation officer down there, who was caught with her pants down, not literally, but caught with her pants down, tipping off criminals. And I dare say it wasn't the first time she'd done it either, because they don't suddenly start tipping off criminals, because Mr. Hall, for want of a better description, admitted he'd known her for several years, so they had a relationship going way back, did they not? And of course my complaint was upheld, but not to the extent I wanted. I wanted prosecuting for gross misconduct, for misfeasance, and they wouldn't do it. And it went through all the chain of command, and they're all bent, and they all protected their bent left-wing probation officer because they were all in it together. And this is what we're dealing with in this country. When people talk about two-tier justice, this is what I'm explaining to you. This is the way it works. This is the two-tier justice system. Although, in truth, as I said to you before, it's actually far more multifaceted than just two-tier. It's far more complex than that, but we'll call it two-tier just for the sake of it. And that's how bad it is. And they're breathing down your neck the whole time, and they're on your case. And my advice is don't trust any probation officer. Even when you encounter the ones like Dave Aaron in York, okay? Don't trust them. Never, ever trust any probation officer. Don't trust any copper. Don't ever trust a prison officer. Don't trust a lawyer. Don't trust a magistrate. Don't trust an activist judge. Trust no one who works for the legal system, even though at times they may come across as being quite decent, better than the scumbags. And there's loads of scumbags in the legal system, believe me. Horrible scumbags. You know, and I'm being very crude, about it, because I don't see any need to prettify my language. Best to just be direct about it. And so Lucy Connolly, this is what she's been released to today. She's been released into the clutches of this absolutely vile, corrupt organisation. Whatever you do, don't mention the several probation officers in Leicester who were taking cocaine from their clients. Oh dear, yes. I've known about that for quite some time as well. And yes, they tried to blame it on the clients, obviously, didn't they? Not the bent probation officers sniffing coke. But there you go. And that's also commonplace. It's a corrupt organisation. It's a nasty, horrible organisation. I've seen it do some extremely unpleasant things to people who didn't deserve to be treated in such a terrible manner. And I've also seen people who have behaved atrociously get treated with kid gloves and pampered, when in actual fact they should have been recalled to prison, because the probation system is just so utterly corrupt, just like everything else in the legal system. So don't trust them. And don't go thinking for 1 minute that Lucy Connolly is going to be able to wax lyrical, or that she's bottled it, because that's what some people will be saying. Oh, she's bottled it. She's too afraid to speak out. No, she's not bottled it. She's not too afraid to speak out. I know the intimidation that she's been subjected to. You don't. I do know the intimidation that she's been subjected to, and you most definitely don't, unless you've been on the receiving end of it, and I have. And she hasn't bottled it. She hasn't bottled it. I'm perfectly sure that one of two things will happen, or both. One, there will be regime change as a result of the uprising that is taking place right now, and it is an uprising, and it will gather pace and momentum, guaranteed. And then you can vote all about your criminal behaviour orders. Promise you that. And then also the fact that a probation period could just elapse before the uprising actually succeeds, because this is going to be a thing that goes in waves, one after the other, until it finally succeeds in bringing down the entire establishment. It's not just Labour we want to bring down, it's the entire rotten, corrupt, twisted, evil foreign occupation government. That's what we're trying to bring down, and that's what we're going to do. But in Lucy's case, it may well be that a probation period, a licence, lapses before we succeed in totality, and then she's then able to speak liberally about her imprisonment and her time on probation. And you'll just have to wait for it, because this is one of the things that I did. I just waited. But behind the scenes, I was working feverishly the whole time. And they said, oh, we don't want you to go to these pagan festivals across the country, because you might actually talk to people about the police. Really? Wonderful. So I never talked to anyone about anyone, did I? I was telling people about it the whole time. I was on WhatsApp. I was telling probably 2 or 3 different dozen people a week about what happened to me and the reason why I'd been in prison, and showing them the evidence that had been framed. So there you go. It doesn't work, does it? It does not work. It only works on the surface when you're playing the game and allowing them to think that they've got some form of compliance. But in reality, you're not complying. You're just doing what you want to do, not what they want you to do. And eventually we're going to triumph over this corrupt system and bring it down. And we're going to destroy foreign occupation government, and we're going to build a new socio-political system in this country that actually puts the British people first and foremost, not foreigners, and certainly not left-wing judges. Okay? That is what we're about. But until then, I think you should just give Lucy Connolly some leeway and some understanding that she's not going to be able to speak out quite as liberally as you would want her to, but it'd be worth waiting for. I mean, she may be able to release some snippets, and then she'll get warnings off the bent probation service, but yeah, absolutely, it's worth waiting for. And I hope she doesn't make that mistake again, quite frankly. I hope she's learned from what she did. And I hope she also learns to play the game and does the same thing that I did. Go for cooperative non-cooperation without actually cooperating in any way, shape or form. It's all part of the game. It's what Trump calls the art of the deal.